There have been 9 countries whose entire economy has collapsed in modern history. It was a result of rampant inflation. Their entire form of currency was discarded, then a new one created. Each story is unique, though. Let's go through each country whose entire economy failed and what led to their downfall. Number 1, Germany, Weimar Republic between 1922 and 1923. By the end of 1922, Germany found it was no longer able to pay the war reparations set forth by the Treaty of Versailles. German industrialists asked German workers to go on a strike. The lack of productivity didn't help their economy. The German government printed more of their money to pay both workers' benefits as well as its delinquent international debt. The influx of money with no corresponding productivity resulted in their money losing value. By December 1923, the exchange rate with the US dollar was 4.2 trillion to 1. It is estimated that by November 1923, the yearly inflation rate was considered 325 million%. Number 2, Hungary between 1945 and 1946. The Great Depression put an initial strain on the Austrian pengo. World War II also took its toll on Hungary. By 1944, the Hungarian pengo's highest denomination was the 1,000 note. A year later, it was 10 million, and by mid-1946, it was 100,000 trillion. The pengo was replaced by the forint. It is estimated that at the time of replacement, the value of all Hungarian currency in circulation equaled less than 1,000th of $1 US. Number 3, Chile between 1971 and 1981. Socialist President Salvador Allende took over many industries. The government soon began hemorrhaging money, and in order to subsidize the loss, the Chilean central bank began printing unbacked currency. This resulted in an inflation rate of 1,200% by the end of 1973. It was followed by political instability. General Augusto Pinochet's US-backed coup d'etat seized control and installed his populist military regime. They replaced their currency escudo by the new peso. The government's decision to sell off newly acquired state-owned enterprises, that started their economic recovery. Number 4, Argentina between 1975 and 1992. The 1973 oil crisis led to the political unrest between Argentine Trotskyists and the Perón loyalists. In the wake of the 1973 oil crisis, the Argentine government, however, decided not to borrow to cover its budget and trade deficits. In March 1976, a violent coup was staged by the country's military leaders. Between 1981 and 1982, Argentina's GDP fell 12%, the worst single-year decline since the Great Depression. When the currency was reformed in 1983, 1 peso argentino was exchanged for 10,000 of the old peso. Then in 1985, the austral was introduced, which replaced the peso argentino at a rate of 1 to 1,000. Then yet again in 1992, the new peso replaced the austral, this time at 1 to 10,000. This end result of this experience in many circles referred to as the March of Zeros, equated to a 1 new peso equal to 100 billion pre-1983 pesos. Number 5, Peru between 1988 and 1991. During the 1980s, Peru's increased public spending privatized enterprise and neglected to service the nation's external debt. It led to hyperinflation. Their government replaced the Peru Old Sol with the Inti. It didn't solve anything. In 2 years, monthly inflation would increase 400%. Again, the Peruvian government decided to replace the currency, this time with the Nuevo Sol. Number 6, Angola between 1991 and 1999. Angola was plagued with civil war from 1975 to 2002. Their currency suffered. By 1994, Kwanza's largest banknote was 500,000. In 1995, the readjusted Kwanza was introduced, and then again in 1999. Number 7, Yugoslavia between 1992 and 1995. Between 1988 and 1989, the Yugoslavian dinar's largest denomination switched from 50,000 to 2 million notes. By 1993, the largest denomination was 10 billion. The government simply removed 6 zeros, forcing the newer dinar to replace the old dinar at a rate of 1 to 1 million. In the next year, the currency was replaced yet again. That didn't solve anything. By January 1995, prices had increased a quadrillion% in 2 years. And as a result, the German mark became the country's fiat currency. It is estimated that during the height of hyperinflation, inflation was increasing by a rate of 100% per day. Number 8, Belarus between 1994 and 2002. Shortly after the Cold War, many of the newly independent Eastern Bloc states began to experience the pains of a currency fluctuation. Belarus was a relatively highly developed economy, but their economy started crumbling. By the end of the 90s, their highest banknote was 5 million. Many people credit the high rates of inflation to the leadership of Lukashenko, who has been in office since 1994. Today, 80% of the country's industries are still nationalized. Number 9, Zimbabwe, 2000 to 2009. When Zimbabwe became an independent African state in 1980, the Zimbabwe dollar was actually valued higher than the US dollar at a rate of 1 to 125. Through a series of questionable race-baited land seizures and rampant money printing, the Zimbabwe dollar began to experience rampant inflation by the early 21st century. Inflation reached 1,730% in 2006. By mid-2007, inflation reached a yearly increase of 11,000%. By 2008, 100 billion new Zimbabwe dollar notes were introduced. As I've mentioned, each country's story is different, but there are 2 things that they all have in common: uncontrollable inflation and a weak economy. The US is far from having a triple-digit inflation rate. Let's keep it that way.